Are you looking to get ready, be prepared, and transform your financial future? Then you've come to the right place. This is the Get Ready Money podcast with Tony Stewart, where Tony has insightful conversations with financial experts who are changing the way we think about money. Catch up on the latest financial trends and hear practical advice from Tony and his expert guests so you can build healthy habits that work. Be empowered with tips for implementing small changes that can have a big impact on your financial future. So sit back and get ready to hear from today's guest.
Welcome to the Get Ready Money podcast, changing the way we think about money. I'm pleased to be joined today by Lily Vittayarukskul, co-founder of Waterlily, and Sumedha Rai, an AI strategist. We'll explore how AI is transforming financial planning from improving client-advisor relationship to protecting against scams. Lily and Sumedha, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
It's great to be here.
Yeah, thanks both for being here. So, to get started, tell us a little bit about your origin story and what led you to the intersection of money and AI. Lily, do you want to jump in first on that?
Yeah, more than happy to, and excited to be on your podcast, Tony, since I've seen your newsletters. They're fantastic. So I run a AI financial planning software company for long-term care planning. And so the way I kind of got into I guess the intersection was really when I built out this company. Prior to that, I actually had a career first in the aerospace industry. So from 12 to 16, was doing some work with NASA, more on the robotics side, went to college early at 14 for it. But then when I was 16, my aunt was diagnosed with terminal stage colon cancer. And that was my first foray firsthand into the healthcare industry. We navigated about 2.5 years of her daily long-term care needs that came with that. It was incredibly financially devastating for us to navigate, but it really tore my family relationships apart to navigate that long-term care event. So that made me pivot my career from aerospace into the healthcare industry, developed a technical background in genetics and AI, studied at Berkeley, ran product and engineering at early medtech and IoT telemedicine startups for a while before I founded this business when I realized there wasn't anything that was incredibly empathetic to the families. And I was pressured actually to first be on the care coordination side still of healthcare, but I took a step back and realized when I built this company to build a sustainable business model, the best way to do that is to ensure better outcomes. And that's when I realized that a lot of these families were best motivated, one, decades in advance, but two, around something that they understand the pain of, decades in advance when they're younger, which is around the finances. So that's where we tied the predictions around their longevity to cost. And that's when we had a real daily almost intersection of money and AI with what I'm working on now.
Wow, that's amazing. But, it is really interesting because people are living longer and, everybody needs to create an aging plan. I've had quite a few guests on who've been talking about that we talk about going to retirement, but it's like a lot of the planning now needs to focus on what happens after retirement or, like these what ifs. So Sumedha, what's a little bit about your background and what
Right.
led you here?
Yeah, first of all, thanks for having me over here, and it's great to be on a podcast with you guys. My origin story is a little different. I feel I started in advisory finance. I was in investment banking and venture cap before I pivoted to tech. One of the core reasons being during calls, I was always asking these tech questions to understand the algorithms or the models running behind the scenes. I remember, like, instead of asking about revenue metrics, I would deep dive into things like, what's the architecture? How are you getting the outcomes? And I decided to pivot to tech, and I just thought I love to build, I love to code. So I did a variety of things in the fintech sector. So I worked with central banks and policy. I research with hedge funds as a quant researcher. I worked with fintech companies and product, and currently I lead fraud detection efforts at a micro investments firm called Acorns Crow. And I'm also a visiting researcher with the Center for Data Science, where my research sometimes has cross collaborations with different departments, just like NYU Langone Health, and that's where I've started seeing this integration of different departments coming together within AI. Like there are similar things in healthcare that also exist in fintech, such as fraud detection, for instance. Like there is insurance fraud in healthcare, but there is a different kind of fraud in fintech. And so the thing that I love about this whole interconnection is that the modeling or the technique for you to tackle a problem remains the same, but you're looking at it from different perspectives. Like the lens through which you look at is different, the domain lens is different. I loved the thing that Lily was talking about people understanding things when it comes to them early on in their life. So the company that I work for right now has things like retirement funds or emergency funds that talks to people about like start planning for things that you don't see right now, or like start long-term planning. And I feel like people are getting more into it. And if there are recommendations that are made at the right time and to the right people, there is more adoption of such products. So yeah, excited to have this conversation.
Oh, um, so you may have noticed a quick drop there. I'll cut that from the podcast drop. Sorry about that, and then we can just keep rolling because I think it's still recording. Um, so, the next question is, how is AI currently being used in the financial planning process, and where do you see it going? Lily, you want to take that one on first, since that's definitely at the
Yeah.
core of Waterlily?
Yeah, I could take a first crack at it. So, what's been really interesting with AI is not only has it helped advisors become really good at their core skill set, at least from what I've seen around, trying to understand investments, portfolio rebalancing, et cetera. So the usual things that they do to help grow their clients' wealth and help them figure out, what is like the right strategy given your risk profile, for example. So their core kind of set of skills. But I've also seen AI be used to expand their skill set as well, where they previously were not in tax planning in any sense, or they previously were not in estate planning in any sense. But then you now see these technology platforms that are coming onto the market to make these topics for advisors, and AI is taking on a lot of that work to do the logic planning, as well as using a lot of data based on families or clients that look like this individual to try to make assumptions or help guide that advisor on how to best, add that add those decisions in, and also how to leverage that as a part of the holistic financial plan for this client sitting in front of them. I think for our work at Waterlily, what we use is AI to help advisors personalize and predict what their clients' future long-term care event is going to look like, which is usually one of the core risk topics that they have to bring up as a part of financial planning, which is long-term care risk. It's, as you said before, Tony, that one of the core things people care about at first is, am I going to have enough money by the time I retire? But what happens when that money disappears post-retirement because of pretty large risks, such as longevity risk or healthcare risk or whatever else? And prior to our work, it was always national averages, zip code calculators, just averages that advisors have always worked with. And instead, now with massive amounts of data, we can now make a much more hyper personalized prediction of either that risk or that growth, and help guide that rest of that conversation. So as you can tell, it's really helped advisors from my perspective in a multifaceted way to essentially help out with that math, that crunching, and make better decisions around what that future projected return or risk is going to look like.
Well, that's fantastic. And I think that's a great outlook on, where AI can go because, my background is in insurance and, obviously risk protection, and having something that's more personalized is, traditionally underwriting has, as you mentioned, like on the life insurance side, height, weight tables, if you have breast cancer, for example, very general statistics, but, getting that more personalized approach. I could also, and I think insurance companies are starting to really use AI to model out their risk protection scenarios for people. And so it'll create more personalized risk, you know, premiums and outlooks and things like that. So that's fantastic. So Sumedha, how are you seeing this being implemented and, maybe more from the fraud side?
Right. I just to touch upon the financial planning aspect of things, I've loved the fact that some of the tasks that we didn't necessarily like to do, like note-taking apps, have come up. And I remember there was a time when I would be scribbling notes in my own shorthand. And then sometimes I would delegate it to someone else or even create redundancy saying both of us should take notes and then exchange it later. That part of the process has been automated to a certain extent. So for me, that has been almost like a boon, so that instead of splitting focus into two different things, I can focus on the most important thing at hand, which is the conversation that I'm having with the stakeholder. So in that sense, I think there are a lot of tools that can be leveraged as an assistant tool, and those are good for your productivity gains. In fact, I think 2 days ago, Claude came up with something called Claude for Financial Services. So it's like an agent that does market research for you, that helps you analyze certain trends in the market so that you are in a better place to make the decision. I feel like the thought from the financial planner is still going to be that person's individual perspective, but there is this whole like drudge work that you have to do to get to it. So using an AI tool for those things, like putting together all the signals from different markets in one place. Like as Lily mentioned before, financial planners are really expanding their portfolios and reaching out to more customers. That also means that you might have to take more signals from different markets across the world into account. That also means that you might have to reach out to customers in different languages. Now, there are tools for these things. There are tools to collect things in more real time from different markets. As soon as the markets open, these systems can then bring all the things together. And at the end of the day, you can see it more holistically. There are tools to translate your findings into different languages and send them to the customer so that, there is more interest in your work. So I feel like all of these things are making the work faster and more holistic in some sense. It's letting you cover more ground faster. In terms of fraud detection, I feel that there is this very cool integration that's happening with the non-tech population as well now. So there was once a time where the risk people would do their work and they would do it in a certain way. And then there were developers that would not exactly understand the problem, but develop something and then pass it on. With this new tech, there is an integration. The developers understand the business problem that you're trying to solve. And then the people who are assessing risk sort of understand how to read the technical metrics. So it's become more of a cross collaboration now. It's a collaborative effort. And honestly, the gains are huge. Because when you have an integrated system, which is less siloed than before, you're going to be able to pick up on more bugs, more problems. You're going to be able to create better processes because your processes are informed by both tech and by the business use case. So I've been enjoying that cross collaboration, and I'm encouraging teams to get more people from different departments to have a say in things when they're developing their models.
Yeah, that's all really interesting. And, the thing that comes to mind is I have a background, I did some litigation consulting on elder financial abuse cases. And so what strikes me is that, as we age, our cognition, some of our cognitive abilities decline. Seniors are targets of financial predators. So I think this is really exciting. We also hear about how AI is also enhanced some financial predators and their ability to scam. But I also see that AI could be used really as a tool to help protect seniors, maybe to monitor transactions. I mean, how are you both seeing that implemented, or how are you implementing it in your own work? Oh,
So
Lily, do you want to go first?
like I could go first, but Sumedha, you're always welcome to kind of just jump
Sure,
in,
yeah, of course, yeah.
since this is your area of expertise. For me, my expertise is just being in the aging ecosystem generally. So I see all sorts of companies across care coordination, financial services. So specifically within financial services, where we see AI powered, sort of like assistance. There are actually quite a few companies that specifically focus on embedding algorithms that help detect scams, specifically that are targeted towards older adults because there's such a high volume, because there's such a more susceptible, I would say, persona versus the younger individuals where they may be a lot more tech savvy. They may see all sorts of new scams that are coming about and also being educated about it much more quickly versus with these older adults, they are struggling with using this sort of technology. They mostly use their iPads, their text messages, like maybe text messages. They mostly do phone calls and email. And these are really hard to detect. Like there's right now AI that if you pick up the phone, it's your granddaughter and it's in her voice. And she says, I really need $10,000 right now. I've been kidnapped, whatever else. Who's going to educate those older adults that that is what's occurring? And honestly, that sort of technology is only becoming better even faster. Same thing with emails. I think not only is there a sheer volume of more scams, but they're all very subtle in terms of, you might be part of Charles Schwab, and then they might say, Charles Schwab bank.com, and you might think, oh, that's the sort of same company. And Sumita could definitely talk about this more deeply, but there are companies I know of such as Eversafe, Careful, TrueLink. I believe also there's LifeLock that focus on embedding algorithms into existing, I would uh, uh, payments, transactions, and that advisors also embed into their, I would say like they co-share sort of the view on those transactions with their clients. So sometimes there's with those clients, there's even more cash management or even an advisor that takes on more of a daily sort of money manager role than, with their younger clients. And so that's where there's a closer tie, not just in financial planning, but also in that day-to-day financial transactions, just because that's another major risk for that particular demographic. But Sumita, I'd love to get your thoughts.
Yeah, yeah. I think th this is like one thing that I could tell the population that is not making themselves aware is to make themselves aware because there are so many different kinds of scams that are coming up. Social engineering being one of them that you talked about, Lily. Everything sounds authentic. There is a note of urgency in the emails sent or the text messages that are sent, and to the extent that like someone calls you up and it sounds like a relative and it's a person who's demanding money and you're prone to do it. So the one piece of advice that I would give people who are still, who are still at the journey, at the beginning of their journey to understand these things is pause. Don't give in to the panic. Don't give in to the fear at that point. Just like pause and double check with someone who you trust. It could be another person. It could be, like your daughter, your son, your spouse is more like into the tech, like someone who you think can assess the situation a little better, maybe two or three people, and then take an action. So don't be in a rush to take an action because you're right. Like there are times when we won't pick up something like Google had three O's in it when it was sent in an email. That said, there are new things that are coming up to make signals a little better. So one can potentially build a model that goes through an email looking for phishing tags. And then you could potentially put a tag in the email saying, this is blue, looks okay to the machine, but here's a signal that's red, or here's a signal that's yellow, which means if you see a yellow sign on this email, just pause, like think twice about what this is. The algorithm has never seen this sender before. The algorithm has never seen this domain before. So there are little things that can come up as flags that can make you pause and think about things. Another thing that I like about mostly archetypes is that if you're a financial planner and you have people of different age brackets within your customer base, there are times when machine learning algorithms are going to tell you who panics more, or in a certain age bracket, there are people who will start to react faster to say economic downturns or scams that are more rampant in the market. They might check their apps a little more, or they might completely stop responding, things like that. So based on these things, you could come up with a cluster of people who you have to give more attention to. So if age is one of those factors, that can be the guiding feature. So for instance, you could tailor your approach to say that if there is a person who's joining me after the age of 50 years or like 65 years or something, I'm going to do more regular check-ins and ask about like how they're doing with the app, how are things with their like finances, are they checking in more often than not, are there any scams that they're aware about that they might be panicking about. So just this like nudging in the right direction also helps with financial planning, and we have tools that can help us do that, like create archetypes. But again, number one tip would be just don't panic and click on a link. Don't transfer that money. Don't answer a call and be like, "Yeah, I'll be right there and I'll make a withdrawal from my bank right away."
If I could just like share, because this makes me really excited and it's so interesting to see. Because Sumedha, when you said like, oh, there's Google with like three O's, the thing is like, well, why did we think that was okay? It's because Google on their daily like search page, they do all sorts of weird things with their logo all the time. And it shows that the responsibility doesn't just fall on the advisor to check on, their older persona, but it's fascinating because I think one, technology platforms themselves have to be aware of like the role that they play in making scams more susceptible to that lay consumer or even the professionals that they serve. And the professionals themselves, what's crazy to understand is they are usually around the same age as their clients. That's what I normally see is like if you have a 30-year-old advisor, they usually get 30-year-old, clients or 40-year-old, 50-year-olds. So where the most amount of wealth is concentrated is with those older wealth advisors. So they have to be more educated than anything else. And technology companies such as ourselves, I can't explain the amount of times where I release a new feature and there's an email kind of notification aspect to it and it goes to spam directly. And it's because sort of these technology platforms that manage communication or like they're the core infrastructure, they're building more advanced ways to kind of detect scams and frauds. But as a result, there's more sophisticated security procedures that we as a software company or that build applications on top of that have to now also be aware of and educated on. So it almost feels like everyone in this ecosystem needs to be educated on it and empathetic to, well, how do we combat scams and frauds?
Right. I think this is a very refreshing take, honestly, because when we're on the consumer side of things, we're so like hyper focused on creating things that cannot come into our inbox that we forget that there are softwares that are building tools to be able to come into the platform. And if they're in there like in the spam folders, or if there are incorrect signals, there can a false positive generation for a software could really harm their business. And I love this take that it does not, the responsibility is not one-sided. It has to be on the side of the technology partner and on the side of the consumer-facing partner. So yeah, I agree. Like if I don't know, if Google was changing their logo like 15 times in a year, it is going to create problems, and that should be something that technology companies should also be more cognizant about. At the same time, consumer-facing companies should not be very strict in how they're handling new emails. Again, I think it should not be an auto suspend, is what I've been recommending to a lot of companies. Nothing should right now be extremely automated to the point that it absolutely gets suspended or blocked. It should
Mhm.
be in the form of flags or alerts, which is to say, if you trust this, go ahead and like mark it as something safe. But this is something new that we haven't seen before. It is not necessarily bad, not necessarily good. So I feel that the way the information is served is equally as important as the algorithm that's serving it.
We could always go deeper, but I know Tony, we don't want to derail this or kind of dive too.
Right. And start having a conversation between ourselves.
Well, no, and this is great, is, I think these are the types of things that advisors and consumers need to be aware of. This is the real stuff. And Lily, you pointed out something fascinating that I hadn't really thought about, but advisors do tend to be the same age and demographic as their clients. And unfortunately, and for people who are watching and listening, you may have heard my episode with Chris Hay, who's an expert in this area, that cognitive decline happens for everyone starting in our 50s. So it's a real thing. So, and so I think the other thing that we need to be aware of is that, that this is a good opportunity for advisors to start bringing in either their younger
Mhm.
partners in the firm as well as the children of their aging clients. And for a lot of advisors out there listening, if you're wondering how to reach that next generation, this is a great way to reach that next generation. And like Lily, when you're creating a longevity plan, or I mean, a long-term plan with the clients, is that's a great time to bring in the adult children so they can be aware of what the parents wish to do and what the risks are and
Mhm.
everything.
Yeah.
So
I'll kind of touch on that with a comment, which is really fascinating to see is that you have a client come in with their, or they have a meeting with their advisor, and their advisor says, "Hey, okay, you have 5 million in assets, and this long-term care event is going to cost you $2 million. So you should buy an insurance policy that covers 1.2 million. So at least like a little over half of that." And that client by themselves says, "Well, that amount of money, the premiums is like, $100,000. I've lost like that could have been $100,000, which grows over time to maybe $1 million at that time that I could have given to my kids." But what I've seen is like when the kid sits in the same room with the client and the advisor, the kid immediately understands, no, you're actually, if your long-term care event was actually going to be, $4 million or even like $6 million, we're actually protecting those assets instead. So what's interesting is I see with the children, they understand that concept of insuring against a much, much larger loss that the parent cares about, passing off that wealth to them, to their clients once they pass. Or if they pass, on the topic of longevity and people saying, they want to live forever, but topic for another time.
I think money.
eternal life.
So I was just saying to Lily's point, I think money math has changed quite a bit over the last 2 decades. And sometimes we tend to have stickiness in our brains about what is going to cost how much. So the numbers feel very exorbitant if you're still thinking about things that used to cost 20 years ago. I've just seen it with my own family where they're sometimes a little surprised that things can cost this much in the next 10 years. But the people who are living those expenses right now, they probably get it, which is where like having kids in the conversation is great.
Definitely. And I think something we forget about with costs is that costs are rising and costs are definitely rising faster than inflation, especially with healthcare. But at the same time, incomes are also rising and our assets are increasing. So I think sometimes too, I'd urge people to look at both sides of the equation, that yeah, things are more expensive, but we also have more income and we have more assets to deploy. But it's really, Lily, as you point out, that's what I've seen is when you bring the kids into the conversation, because a lot of people, their plan, their caregiving plan is to have their kids take care of them as they age. And the kids are not usually on board with that plan on being caregivers.
Mhm.
So
Yep, completely agree with you. And it's a deeper this is a deeper conversation. I would say it's like almost like the battle of the generations a little bit, where there are those in the baby boomer generation that would say like, oh, it's because you're not working hard enough, like for whatever else. But then if we look at the data, what's actually fascinating is that our salary growth on average if we were to stick with any one employer, maybe they give you a 2 to 3% bump so that it matches with inflation. However, when it comes to healthcare inflation, the number that we use from the actuarial tables from CMS is 5.4%. And so, if anything, financial planning and being sophisticated about your finances and when to invest and investing early is more important than it ever has been because the stakes are higher, I would argue.
yeah, definitely. And that gets ties into the longevity. People are also living longer. So that comes with that double-edged sword of it costs more to live longer. Um, so yeah.
I mean, Sumedha also like was an investment banking, so she understood like, hey, we have to make these these much higher aggressive returns. And there wasn't that many people had the appetite for that. Only those with a lot of wealth kind of were sophisticated enough about their like financial strategies to see that. But I think we're trying to make alternative investments and et cetera more accessible, I would say, by the mass market. So it's an interesting technology trend that I see as well.
I've
And
seen
oh,
the
sorry.
I was just saying, like, to Lily's point, I completely agree with the fact that the income is catching up, but it's not catching up as fast as inflation. And we sort of see the market recognizing it because we've seen savings investment accounts that are coming up with now that pay interest to you now. There is a reason why people think that savings bank accounts should not have money that's sitting there like cash and not earning interest. So you have to be able to make your money work for you in some way, whether it's the market or a high yield savings bank account or an investment strategy. That's really up to you, but it has to work because the costs of, say, healthcare or expenses or buying a new house, they're going up faster than your income increases every year. So it's just the delta that you have to make up for.
That is a compelling point, and yeah, and I guess I should have included that as really is that yeah, the costs are increasing at a faster rate than income, and the thing that concerns me about some of these alternative assets is that people don't really even understand the assets they're currently investing in, and so there's a risk there. But that's something where AI might be able, or definitely can help people create their portfolios and manage them and make observations, because, advisors may do a basic risk assessment and, but again, that's very generalized. And so, I would, based on what you're both saying, is that AI could create a very personalized risk profile and then monitor someone's investment portfolio to keep in line with that investment portfolio, I mean, with their risk profile and everything. So, so one last question on AI is just how can advisors really integrate AI into their workflow, and should they be scared by AI? Sumedha,
I
you want? Oh, sorry, Lily, go for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll just go first, really quickly. I'll work on that question backwards a bit
Sure.
because there is a wealth of consumer apps, and I only expect this to continue to grow that have AI embedded in it. A lot of consumer like financial apps that are more accessible now than it ever been before, where usually when you manage your brokerage account, you could manage your brokerage account by yourself, you can manage your own budgeting by yourself. And they now have these AI modules associated with them that allow you to be a lot more intelligent about, okay, how do we categorize those budgets? Like, how do we understand what your investments are kind of bundled under? Do you want a different bundle in some way? And so the usual roles and responsibilities that advisors had in the past with clients is now being commoditized through these AI consumer apps. So the answer is definitely yes. These advisors need to understand and become comfortable with using AI, and specifically because they have access still to investments, as well as certain types of accounts that consumers may not have access to. They should really be leveraging that in addition to how powerful AI could be to help them understand, more complex vehicles that consumers still can't understand, that can't be fully explained by AI, especially since buying into a certain investment strategy or buying into an insurance policy is still a very psychological, emotional buying process. So if anything that deals with a lot of money, relatively speaking, you still want to talk to a human being at the end of the day. We better hope that human being or that financial professional is very competent at being able to explain the more sophisticated strategy that was recommended by that AI.
Yeah. What do you, what's your perspective on this, Sumedha?
I'm gonna talk about a more generalized view of like not being super scared about it. I do not still think that AI is a silver bullet that's gonna solve all your problems, but I do think that it's an important part of the workflow, especially for a domain such as financial planning, where there's like so much information available. I feel like there are so many cool ways to balance some of the things. So, for instance, you have a workflow in your financial planning for a customer. Now, it can become hyper focused based on the customer's needs, which means that using something like alert me for the need to rebalance the portfolio for this customer if this customer has extra needs, or if the risk appetite changes, are certain things that you can do at scale using AI. If I had 10 clients and I had to listen to all of their needs and make sure that those are included in their portfolios, there's only so much time that I have and I can do it manually. But you could do it for 100 clients and you could do it at scale. So this is what AI can bring for you. It's increasing productivity and increasing attention at scale. And you are sort of like the human on the loop, which means you have the kill switch. So the rebalancing or contacting the client or understanding that this portfolio needs more attention has to be done by you, which is what Lily said. Like the competence of financial planning or decision making still rests on the human, but the alerting, the information gathering, the data collection, the nudging can all be done using like automated workflows, which are I think really useful. I, at the end of the day, I think the empathy factor that a person needs from a financial planner still has to come from a human. I do not want to be anxious about my retirement plans and texting a bot about it. I would never do that. But at the same time, as a financial planner, if I was going to a stakeholder and saying, look, this part of the workflow has been automated and it's much more sophisticated because it increases the knowledge pool that I have at my disposal. And this I'm doing using this new tech, which is like artificial intelligence, and it does everything, gives me better alerts, gives me more timely alerts. But the decision making rests with me, which means I'm available for you 24/7. If there are changes in your needs of long-term planning, if you need to, think about buying a house or like taking care of someone, I'm the person who you talk to. I'm the person who's going to advise you about things. That sort of combination makes a lot of sense. And that's the right way to integrate it, instead of being extremely scared and saying, it's going to take over my job, so I'm never going to touch this tool, and I'm entirely not going to use it because I can do it better. We all can use some extra help. We all can use an assistant, right? Like if I tell you, what's the part of your job that you could outsource to another person, you will come up with something. That's exactly the question that you could answer. Like, what's the part of your job that you feel someone else could take care of? And you probably have a tool for that.
I'll also double down on what Sumedha said, which is the people skills is becoming more important than it ever has been, especially because we are now picking our advisors not only on how competent that they appear, how good their communication is around the technical aspects, but also too, it's just we really like them as people and we want to learn from them. And when it comes to making decisions around our investments or our budgeting or how we protect our risk, they still require time for us to understand, and we don't have the patience. If anything, we're so mean to I would say like AI bots or any sort of AI assistant tools or any software, but directly we're just very mean to it. Just look at enough chat histories within ChatGPT or within Claude, for example. We're not very nice. But and so what makes us think that we're going to have the patience for that AI to educate us on what it takes to kind of manage this risk or whatnot. And so being able to have a human being that we trust, that is more the professional, that is taking that time, that is their career, to essentially get us to buy into like, oh, this is important, okay, tell me more, and then tell me more after that, and then you sort of make that decision together, is incredibly important. So in other words, the AI is becoming exceptionally great at building out better algorithms than we ever had before, crunching that data. And that leaves us more room, the advisor, to develop more of those people skills. And we have to, and also scaling our business to more clients, being able to just come off, I would say, more sophisticated. So just use AI tools to help you be able to do that.
I love your point about like the interpersonal relationship, Lily. I've seen this so many times, even when I'm making decisions. If I need a service and I'm talking to two people at the same time, I don't, given that the behind the scenes tech looks somewhat the same, my preference is to the person who I connect with more. And for financial planning, that's so true. Like something that we talked about before, the age factor comes in. If you're a person of a certain generation, you connect on things like your time, the place where you grew up, or things like that. It's still very interpersonal. So those connections are more important now than ever. And if two people are using the same tech behind the scenes, you would probably pick the one who you connect with more.
Definitely. Yeah. And, I know in my own personal use of AI that it's a great tool that can help amplify my work. But yeah, I think the future of advising is we're seeing this with the implementation of financial behavior and the understanding of, like life planning with George Kinder is, really getting to know the client. And the most successful advisors, that I've met throughout my career are the ones who've been able to develop those human relationships anyway. And so now it's, if you want to succeed, you need to have that human relationship. So to wrap up, the final question is just what is your number one tip on changing the way we think about AI? Lily, you want to take that one first?
Sure. And if anything, if I don't know if Sumedha already has an answer. I almost want to marinate on that question a little
Oh,
bit.
okay. Sumedha,
Yeah,
do you want to
sure.
take this one?
Yeah, I think the thing that the number one tip that I would give people is to just make yourself a little more aware about this technology. I see a lot of people buying into the fear that is coming from other people. Uh, my number one suggestion is if you want to be scared about it, get your firsthand experience and then be scared about it. Like, try it out. People are buying into the social media, I don't know, like forwards and WhatsApp things that people keep sharing with each other. There is almost there is a lot of misinformation circulating around in the market that you're going to get completely replaced by bots and AI. And while, there are certain jobs that are going to get replaced, nobody's really forcing you to do everything using AI. Nobody's really forcing you to automate everything using AI. Go in there, start using the tools, and then come up with an opinion yourself. A lot of fear that's there in the market or amongst people who haven't used it before is because they haven't used it before. So before you form an opinion about the tech, before you start giving into the fear of this, like humans are going to get replaced by AI, please go use it and see if it's giving you some productivity gains. In my opinion, we're not at a stage where there is a complete replacement possible right now. Our brain, our personalities, they're very different. We're not at a stage where we've created bots that can replace things at all. Like the first thing that comes to mind is I saw a forward recently where a simulation was done in China for an AI hospital, and it was like a really cool simulation that people showed. But then when it was forwarded, the narrative had been completely changed to say China's not using doctors anymore, and the doctors are going to get completely replaced. They're doing everything using AI, which is not true. Like, you still need doctors, you still need experts. So invest time in educating yourself about the technology, and you might actually get pleasantly surprised.
I love that.
I
Uh,
also personally really love that. And I wanted to add on top of that theme of empowerment. I'm just going to double down on, my number one tip is my hope that with any listeners to this channel here is that it's all about empowerment. Whether you decide to use AI or not AI, at least you should be empowered by being educated on what the trade-offs are. Like, what are the advantages and what are the trade-offs? And it is your choice at the end of the day. So for example, with Waterlily, I've seen plenty of advisors that make the conscious decision to say, I want to I've always been used to national averages, the zip code calculators, and I know exactly how it works. And for me to fully understand how it works, it's worth it to me for more variation or like potentially like higher risk that my client could take on or not. That gives me more of a peace of mind. So emotionally, what empowers you a little bit more. Then there are others that recognize, with AI, it can be exceptionally good at taking in a lot of data, being able to take in a lot of those patterns and look at more of a hyper personalization of that service in some way. So for us, it's a hyper personalization of what that future long-term care cost is going to look like, being able to analyze any policy that you have or are looking into, and then mapping that back to their their predicted cost to see how does that policy function for that cost. And instead of hypothetical tables that they kind of have to sift through and try to understand, it's a single line item. So that can be incredibly empowering for that advisor or for that client themselves. So whether you want to, run the math through spreadsheets, I don't think that you should feel any shame in doing that. I think that it's just whatever makes you feel like you have more control. And it really matters to me that humans still feel like they have control in this system, and they will have to have control in the system. Otherwise, we're in a really deep trouble if humans no longer feel like they have control. Ultimately, as we build out these AI systems that help us, that assist us with everything, we are still the architect of our life. We are still the architect of a certain service that we want to offer, and we should be educated as if we are still that architect in some way. The moment we say we're not good enough, we're not smart enough to be that architect, then that's where you now have good AI and bad AI, quote unquote, like that competing, that are essentially like iterating on each other, and you don't know who's going to win at any time. And the only thing that really prevents us from getting into that state of unknown and uncertainty is by continuing to have that human in the loop to really try to understand the system as a way of kind of control and regulation.
Just highlighting something that Lily mentioned because I read about it recently. Maybe a good way to start would be to pick a tool that you're already familiar with, that you feel in control about. So, for instance, if I read about a new tool from Fundamental Research Labs, which automates Excel sheets. It's called Shortcut. If you feel more comfortable with spreadsheets, maybe start there. Maybe have a tool that integrates into that the environment that you already feel in control of. So then you'll be able to better understand the advantages of using that. You'll be able to better understand whether it's giving you a sort of leg up in your work or whether it's hindering your work. So maybe start there, something that you're already comfortable with, something that makes you feel in control, and then add a tool to it. And that's a good place to start.
That's awesome advice. Sumedha, where can people find out more about you and get in touch with you?
I think LinkedIn would be the best place. I read about some of the updates from people both in finance and in tech over there. So I feel like people could reach out to me over there and read about my updates as well.
Fantastic. And Lily, how about you?
Right now, I would say most active on LinkedIn. Honestly, if anyone has questions about what I do, they would like my feedback on certain AI tools, or if they're like building something, I do get LinkedIn messages. Also, you're welcome to email me. I'm actually like quite sociable and I do respond back. So you could reach me at lily@joinwaterlily.com. So like JOINWATERLILY. Or if you wanted to go to waterlily.com and you wanted to join our waitlist because you want to better understand our tool in particular, which is where my expertise lies, I have a pretty close eye on that waitlist, and I do take consumers off of that waitlist and taking them on as my own clients as well. So in case people want a closer, tighter relationship loop with me, I have pretty open channels, and two is I'm more than happy to just serve them and guide them directly as well.
Fantastic. And for everybody watching and listening, as always, there will be links to Lily and Sumedha's websites, social media profiles, and everything else. So you don't have to keep rewinding to write all this down. So if you missed it, it'll be in the show notes. So thank you both for joining me today on the Get Ready Money podcast.
Our pleasure. I spoke for Lily as well. My pleasure. And I hope I can say the same for Lily.
Yeah, so thanks. You both are just amazing people, and I appreciate you sharing everything today. And thank you, everyone, as always, for tuning in to this episode of the Get Ready Money podcast. If you learned something today to change the way you think about money, please be sure to subscribe and to share it with a friend. You can also go to my website to join the Get Ready movement at tonystewart.com to receive my newsletter, podcast updates, and access to a whole bunch of free resources. Until next time, let's change the way we think about money.